Hey guys, how you doing? There he is.
How are you, man?
Will, disappointed.
Yeah. I got to stop doing this, I guess. I'm catching a lot of heat.
Stop doing what?
I didn't know if you were I didn't know. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you. I got you.
What?
Are you talking about the hat? Yeah. I've got
So
one just like yours up in my closet here. If you want me to get it down, we could be Cupies.
I know I put on this hat today and I thought, hey, he has this hat. Like I wonder if he'll wear it.
But if I'm being completely honest with you, it's got a little bit of dog excrement on it right now due to an accident I had with the King Shepherds the other day. So
Wow.
yeah, they decided it'd be a good idea to plow the old man down in the backyard, and I could tell you the whole story, but it might not be appropriate for YouTube. I don't know. So
Might not be.
yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You probably don't get any messages about me, but I get all requests all the time that say, you got to go live with Mr. Global. You got to go live with Mr. Global. So,
Well, actually, your name come up quite a bit in my lives, and I've been wanting to interview some people, and your name kept coming up, so I reached out to you first. The people ask me, and I don't know how to answer the question.
yeah.
I've had people ask me, "Is Will Westmoreland the Mr. Global of agriculture?" And I'm like,
No.
I mean, he's a farmer, but like I need to interview him because I don't know that much about him.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, in all honesty, your understanding of the gas and oil market, because of what you do, you understand the full broad range of everything from the on the ground stuff to how the markets are impacted. I'd guess probably futures, all that good stuff. I have never been a row crop farmer. I understand the basics of row cropping because of the fact that I live around these folks and I care about ag policy and I study it. But just practical hands-on, I've never been a row crop farmer. I did operate a 300 cow calf operation at one time, but now I do what I call easy farming. I got smart. No, I do easy farming now. I raise Chinese chestnuts and walnuts and elderberries, blackberries, and then we opened a mushroom house. And then we're getting ready to open a milling company so that we can take Missouri Chinese chestnuts that are raised in Missouri and mill those into gluten-free flour. So I would say that I'm a farmer and I've got a lot of background in agriculture and I understand the policy, but I wouldn't say I'm the Mr. Global, because when you start getting, I can tell you if futures are going up or if futures are going down, and I can tell you the basics of what impacts that. But in terms of having the level of understanding about farm economics that you do about gas and oil, that'd be a little bit of a stretch. So
Well, people want someone to go to
yeah,
help answer their questions they have. So,
I can do that. And if I don't know
yeah.
the answer, I do what Mr. Global says to do. I go research it and find the right answer. So it's not
Uh,
hard, everybody. Just so you know, it's not hard to find the right answer instead of yanking one out of your sphincter.
exactly.
Yeah.
Lorianne Wormley, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate that. So, Will, the point of these interviews,
Yeah.
if I didn't say it before, I want to do these with quite a few people, and it's
Yeah.
sort of a get to know you kind of thing.
Sure.
Give people the opportunity to get to know the creators, that they follow and watch every day, and because we aren't the best at at teaching people who we are. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we think it comes through with our content, but they don't know a lot of our background, our history, how we got to where we are. So this is kind of just a lighthearted get to know you kind of thing. It's
I
not
love it.
it's not political or anything like that. I think people just want to get to know Will, and so uh, you you don't use it as much anymore, but you used to have your opening line, which I thought was a great line. Hi, I'm Will Westmoreland, your rural campaign and elections expert.
Yeah.
So, which is really a great line. It's a great
Yeah.
opening line for every piece of content. Like you're telling people who you are, right? So, how did you get? Have you held office? Been involved in campaigns? Like, where does all of that come from?
Yeah, my dad passed away when I was really young, and I ended up after kind of living in the social safety net for the first few years of my life. My grandpa came and picked us up and took us out to his 600-acre farm, and I became a farm kid. Best thing that ever happened to me, Matt. And but he was always really active, like most farmers were at the time, in understanding politics and what was happening at the national level. So I would say, even at that early age, just sitting there watching Walter Cronkite with my grandma and grandpa, I started to kind of get that itch a little bit. Like I knew this was important, and I knew that a good farmer needed to stay on top of, the critical issues of the day. And then what happened to me is what happens with a lot of people. It was actually a teacher in middle school who took us all on a trip to Jefferson City, to the state capitol here. And man, when that van pulled up to the state capitol and I saw that big dome and walked inside and saw all those paintings, murals on the wall, I was just hooked. And got involved in my first senatorial campaign as a volunteer back in high school. And then just I kind of went from there. I worked for the Clinton Gore campaign in 1992 in Ohio and ran a few other races, local races. I ran a state Senate race in Missouri in my 20s. And then there was so much travel involved, and I was a young dad. I had 3 kids at the time. I just decided to do something more stable at that point. So for the next 25 years or so, I worked corporate jobs with big wireless companies. I was a VP, for these wireless companies. But on the side, I was always running campaigns. I was serving as my rural county party chair. Once you get that bug, you just can't shake it off. Uh, and then, about 15 years ago, I just said, you know what? I want to do this full time. So, along with the things I'm doing in farming, I started my own consulting company, and but I also wanted it to impact rural America. So I focus mainly on rural races, Democrats that are running in rural areas. Although every once in a while I'll get a bigger race, like we did all of the text messaging and phone calls and things like that for the Ossoff and Warnock races down in Georgia during those special elections, and those were big ones. But yeah, just in one form or another, I've been involved in it for over 30 years. And it's in my
Wow.
blood, and I'll probably say something political on my deathbed right before they claim me. It'll be that ingrained in me.
So when you're working on, this is contract work, I assume.
Yeah.
Are you involved like in the strategy? Are you involved in opposition research? Like, are you giving advice? Are you digging up dirt on people? Like, because this is really fascinating to me. So
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, like,
I did
how
I
deep in the
did that
weeds.
in my earlier political career. Yeah, I did some muckraking, as they say. Because the dirty little secret in politics is there are 2 ways that you win. The first way is you get your candidate's message out there, and the second way is you try to suppress the vote of the opposition by telling everybody what a dirty dog they are. Okay. So early on, I did both of those things. Now, really, my primary focus is to get Democrats to understand you've got to get out to rural. I mean, I've made this my mission in life. You've got to get out to rural America. You've got to understand what it is that they do, and you've got to learn to talk to them. And you're going to have to take some heat when you first do that because you haven't been there for a while. But that's okay. Take the heat. And so my focus lately has been mostly on trying to build, some real positive communication between the Democratic Party and rural America. And in the next few days, we've got some really cool things that are happening. uh, man, I catch so much heat from my side when I say things like this, but that's okay. Um, I'm seeing the first inklings that they're getting out there and they're doing that with the new party chair from Minnesota, who's got a farming background. That's a big
Mhm.
help. He knows when he talks to people where we live, he knows, he understands them. He understands what they do. He understands blue collar. He understands farming. So I think we're going to see a long overdue change there. And I'm just working to try to facilitate that while also raising hell with my own party about what they're doing wrong in rural. So,
That's good. We need
yeah,
more of that.
yeah,
We need people holding their parties
yeah,
accountable.
yeah. And,
And
I'm like you, Matt. I've never understood the big deal about criticizing people that you vote for. Like it's some kind of unwritten rule that once you vote for somebody, you've got to just blindly agree with everything they do and say, hell, I've never done that. I was vocal about my criticisms of Bill Clinton and NAFTA and what he did with Monica Lewinsky. I was vocal in my criticisms of Barack Obama and how he used drones overseas. I mean, I just don't get that. It's like you owe it to yourself to be the greatest critic of the people you helped put in office. And that's just gone now. Anyway, that's a soapbox speech, but
absolutely.
yeah.
What would say sort of your highlight has been working in campaigns, biggest victory or moment that kind of sticks out to you the most?
Man, you're going to think this is really stupid, but because it's not like who I've met or anything like that. When I was in my 20s, they used to let me do volunteer driving for the Secret Service when Bill Clinton would come into town. So, as a young man in my 20s, getting to drive an 18-seat passenger van 85 miles an hour through downtown Columbus, Ohio, was probably one of the most exhilarating things that I've ever done. But I got to tell you the funniest story out of all my years in politics. I've got a really good friend who passed away back in 2008 named Paul Wellington. He was 6'2", 480 pounds, and we called him Beef Wellington. And anyway, I got the Beef a job driving one of these minivans for the Secret Service with really clear instructions because he was a little bit of a hellraiser in his younger days. I said, do what you're told. Don't do anything else other than what you're told. And when somebody says jump, you say how high. He's like, yes, sir. So we go out to the Columbus International Airport, and President Clinton lands, and the Attorney General of the state of Ohio. I mean, all the bigwigs from the state of Ohio. They all go over and get on a helicopter to fly out and visit a police academy to talk about crime and that kind of thing. Beef just couldn't help himself. He walks out beyond the tape where he is, where he's been taped off, and he wanders out onto the tarmac underneath Air Force One. And all of a sudden, you start to notice all these little red dots populating Beef's skin from the snipers, up on the building, and a full bird colonel walks out and just lit him up like a Christmas tree. You get your fat ass back behind the tape, or I'm going to turn you into a grease spot a mile wide. And it was just that scene of him walking with his tail between his legs, back to where he was supposed to be. And it's one of my best memories of him as a dear friend and one of the funniest things I ever saw happen in politics. So probably not the romantic answer anybody was looking for, but it's one of my best times.
So you're in Southwest Missouri, correct?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm a little bit familiar with Southwest Missouri. I
Yeah.
had some family actually that farmed there for a very long time.
Okay.
Um, there's not a lot of Democrats in Southwest Missouri, at least in
No.
my experience. So, what's it like competing in a geographic area that is so heavily weighted to one side?
It's really tough. I mean, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or anything, but I've probably, donated to campaigns with my company over $250,000 to try to get Democrats elected. And a lot of them still lose 80 to 20, 75 to 25, So you got to be on a mission because it's going to took 40 years to get where we are, and it's going to take a long time to get back to where we've got more than 20 or 30% of the rural vote. It can be discouraging. Like, Matt, I'll tell you a perfect example. There's a guy that when I was in high school, he was our ag teacher. His name's Al Skaliski, and he ran for the state senate here in Missouri in my state senate district. Now, for 38 years, this guy's been teaching young men and women how to farm, how to ranch. He understands everything there is to understand about agriculture. And he sent generation after generation after generation of kids into the farming business field. And I mean, he's just everything you'd be looking for in an elected official. Honest guy, very, very middle of the road. He ran for office in this congressional district and only got about 24% of the vote, running against a candidate whose only claim to fame is that she and her husband own like a 100 cow calf operation. And it was just really frustrating to see him go out and go in front of organizations like the Farm Bureau and the Missouri Cattlemen's Association and all of these groups that should have just been like gung ho about him getting elected. And then they wouldn't endorse him just because he had a D in front of his name. So, yeah, it's really, really tough. And the way we're kind of working it right now is we're trying to find these districts that are right outside of the bluer cities that kind of fall into that suburban and then farming community. And we're trying to turn some of those and then maybe work our way out. But it's going to be a long haul. It's going to be a long, long haul.
Yeah. I think most people don't realize, I mean, at least where I live, the local politics is a lot more diverse, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm pretty sure I live in the most conservative state in the country. Our local politics is a pretty diverse bunch of Democrats and Republicans because it's more local and people know each other.
Yeah.
And it's a rural area, right? One of the worst things that happened, and even though I'm an independent, one of the worst things that happened to Democrats was straight ticket voting.
Yeah.
When they went to that a few years back, we had some really, really good local officials that had been elected, many times to hold
Yeah.
their positions, and they all lost,
Yeah.
the first year, and they were replaced by people that had no business. Our county assessor has never owned a piece of property in his life and
Yeah.
knows nothing about assessing anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
just someone that
Yeah.
had
Yeah,
an
I
R
do.
next to their name.
Yeah.
Have
I
you had
think
that
you're
problem in
right.
Missouri with straight ticket voting, or?
You vote in the primary, you have in the state of Missouri, when you vote in the primary, you have to select a party ballot in the primary. Okay. And what a lot of Democrats will do, because when you go to the general election, you don't have to vote straight ticket. You can vote for either candidate. But I've got to tell you, like in the county I grew up in the county where my farm is right now, where I vote, nobody makes it out of the Democratic primary anymore. Up until about 6 years ago, we had one Democrat in St. Clair County, where my farm was. Now there are no Democrats. And so, what a lot of Democrats do, Matt, is they actually grab a Republican ballot. You can take a primary ballot from either party, regardless of what party you're registered as, and you can vote in that. So, like, if you want to have a say so in who gets elected, because once that Republican wins the primary, they're going to win office. You will take that Republican primary ballot and you'll vote in that primary. But that's a trade off, because if you do that, Matt, you can't vote in the statewide elections, or you can't vote in a congressional election for the Democratic candidate you may want to see get through, the process. But I will tell you that, like myself personally, when Donald Trump ran for reelection was the first time, even as a Democrat that works in the business, that was the first time I ever voted a straight ticket. And I did that on purpose. I've always voted mostly Democrat, but I've always voted, for whoever I thought was best for the position. But the bigger problem that Democrats have over here is that they just don't get out and talk to rural people. And I catch a lot of heat for saying that, but you can't fix the problem if you don't recognize that the problem exists. So I call it kind of the golden palace way of running a campaign. Somebody decides they want to be a U.S. Senator from Missouri, so they put their campaign headquarters up in St. Louis, and they go from St. Louis to Kansas City to Columbia to Springfield and back again, because they don't want to get out there and take the heat. I love taking the heat. It's like, all right, get it off your chest now. Let's talk about how we can make it better. But that's our biggest problem here. And I'm seeing like I said, I'm seeing the first inklings of that changing, and I'm looking forward to it.
John Ditter, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. If you guys have any questions you want to ask Will, I have quite a few, but please feel free to put them in the comments. I'll try to get to as many as I can. I honestly
John
don't
must
know
have
how
hit
much.
the scratch off this morning or something, Matt. That's pretty good.
I don't know how much time Will has, but I'm going to try
I
to
can
get through
stay
these
as long
questions.
as you need me to, until you get tired of me. Just kick me off.
Okay. So tell me about, because I've followed you for a while.
Yeah.
At what point, like you got on social media at some point? Was you on TikTok first? Was that where you kind of got serious about spreading your message through
Yeah, I mean,
social
I jumped
media?
on TikTok like at the beginning of last year and just made a couple silly videos from my farm, and but I got serious about it in June of last year before the election, and kind of for the same reason. I think if I understand your videos correctly in the beginning, kind of for the same reason you did. I just felt there was a real misunderstanding about what happens behind the scenes in politics. Everybody looks at it like, it's the Wizard of Oz or something, and it's not like that at all. It is very contentious. There are people fighting these things out before it goes out into the public, et cetera. And then the other thing was, people didn't really understand the impacts of politics in rural America. So I honestly, probably the same way you did, I didn't come on here thinking someday I was going to have a couple 100,000 followers, and all of a sudden people were going to be asking me, well, what about this? What about that? I just went on to explain those two things. And man, when I got on there, people were like starving for that information. Like, just like me with you, like I thought the president was 100% responsible for gas prices. Blew my mind when I started watching your videos and learned that was all bullshit. Because for 30 years, I've been telling everybody, don't vote for that guy. He caused your gas prices to go up, So that's why I did it. And it just took off from there.
You were in campaign mode.
I was in campaign mode. I was in campaign mode. But, don't underestimate what you do, though, because it really just cuts through the bullshit and lets people know what is impacting fuel prices and what isn't. And some of it is politician driven, but a lot of it isn't. And I just can't begin to tell you, like, I'll walk up to people, I'll talk to the guys at breakfast on Saturday morning, and they'll say, I mean, they've even said this, well, you're TikTok famous, but you're not as famous as Mr. Global. So the message is getting out, whether you want it out there or not. They're all ball busters.
I can promise you, it's not all rainbows and pixie dust.
No, I'm
It's a
learning that
nightmare
lesson
sometimes.
the past couple of weeks. Trust me.
Yeah. James Lynn, $5 super chat. Lucas Kuntz got out there with Missouri farmers. Same with Jess Piper from Dirt Road Democrats. You have any
I'll
comment on that?
agree. I'll agree with that with Jess Piper. Jess Piper is a female politician in Northwest Missouri who's a former teacher. We know each other really well. I talk to her regularly. She got out there, and I mean, she made a difference. She raised more money for her campaign than any other Senate or House race in the state of Missouri. And she got out there. She told the truth. She laid it out on the line, and she didn't even get 30% of the vote. Kind of like that example I was giving you earlier, but she's fighting the fight. You know, you got to get people to start running. You got to get them to lay their case out there. And trust me, it's fertile ground right now out here. I mean, I've heard more farmers and ranchers in the last month say, "What the hell is going on?" or "I made a mistake," than I've heard in 30 years. Lucas Kuntz. I'll just keep my opinions on that to myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I know that a lot of politicians that run for statewide office here make the mistake of thinking that going out and doing a few staged events here and there are campaigning, to rural America. And I'm not speaking directly to Lucas, but there was not enough of a Democratic presence in rural Missouri during the last statewide election cycle. That's my opinion. And you know what they say about those.
So Chris wants to know, why aren't farmers saying anything about how what's happening with USAID will affect farmers. Would you like to
I mean,
address
they
that?
are. There's a whole subgenre of social media that's dedicated to farmer and rancher mea culpas right now, and there are thousands of videos out there from farmers. The problem is they don't show up on your FYP unless you're regularly following, farming and ranching content and maybe a little bit of political content. But yeah, I mean, social media is packed with farmers and ranchers that are saying, I screwed up. I shouldn't have voted for this guy. He doesn't understand agriculture. Markets are just disappearing. I love what you say in gas and oil about what happens when an American source of gas and oil gets replaced by a foreign competitor. In farming and ranching, when that happens, it hardly ever comes back to the American source again. So when we put these tariffs on China, uh, Brazil, who used to supply 14% of row crop products to China, now supplies 43%. And that's not going to come back, barring some horrible drought or natural disaster down in Brazil. Then we've gotten rid of USAID, which is another $1 billion, in purchases. Now we're threatening tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and Europe. And even though they haven't placed reciprocal tariffs on it, just their patriotism is causing them not to buy our products. And I just keep asking the question, when you figure out how to replace 1.4 billion Chinese bellies with 340 million American bellies, then you're really doing something, because we can't buy all the product in this country that China isn't buying anymore. That's just a ridiculous assertion, and for a politician to say that, it just shows they have no understanding of how it works. Kind of the
Right.
same shit you hear about gas and oil out of their mouths.
So, recently you got a lot of attention for how you responded to Skylar, right?
Yeah. Oh
Um, I,
God.
I,
Yeah,
I,
that's an
I
understatement.
felt it. Like I
Yeah.
literally felt it for you. I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I watched your video when you invited Skylar to speak to you, right? And
Yeah.
I watched that, and the first thing I thought was, he might regret this, like, because I knew you might get
Yeah.
more attention than you wanted. I thought you might get a lot of negative attention. Let's be honest, people on the left are as
Yeah.
nasty as people on the right.
I would
When
argue even more so when it comes to that
Yes,
kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah. So here you are reaching out to, and I I didn't pay enough attention to Skylar to know if he was left or right, and I don't make any assumptions about people. But we reached out to him, and I found out really quick that Skylar was on the
Yeah.
right, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. He
And
voted for Donald Trump, and he's got a lot of social media back there that, proves that you could say MAGA in the past. Yeah.
so I guess the question is, sort of, what was your motivation for reaching out? I feel like I know what it was.
Yeah.
And do you regret it? Was it an overall good experience for you or him? Or did it turn out to be negative? Like, just speak on that a little bit.
That's a great question. First of all, you know, I love what you said once about, I know you, but you're not my friend on social media, right? You did a video once about that because of all the people reaching out to you. Here, you and I know each other, but we're not friends. We don't sit down, we don't have coffee together. But I think one thing we probably do have in common is, if I was in my 20s, I would have cared a whole lot about what the backlash was going to be to that video. But where I am now, it's like, I've got a core group of friends that are going to be there if I ever get in trouble, and those are my friends. And I've got a pretty thick skin, so I knew the blowback was going to be really hard on that video, and I knew it was going to be even harder from my side than it was from Skylar's side. And I'll be honest with you, the whole purpose was, um, when somebody, and I know Skylar's not there yet in terms of just flat out saying I was wrong, okay? And God bless him. I'm not sure, based on everything else he said, why he's hesitant to do that. And I've given him that advice, okay? Because he said Donald Trump needs to be impeached. He said, I made it, he's got to get there. But anyway, my point is this: when people admit they're wrong in rural America, because of the way the voting patterns are here in rural America, when they admit they're wrong, and then they start reaching out to say, how can I get involved to change these policies that are hurting rural America? You've got two choices. You can say, go to hell. You didn't vote the right way. You're not going to be part of fixing it. And I think what you run the risk of doing there, I know what you run the risk of doing there, is you're just keeping them isolated. And the odds that they're going to go right back to doing what they were doing before are probably 80, 90%. So what I was trying to do with that video is say, and I even made the point in there, but not very many people heard it. While we're fighting like hell to stop these policies that are hurting rural America every single day, we need to be willing to just offer that much grace when somebody says, I was wrong, I made the wrong decision, I want to get involved in fixing the wrong that I helped create. We've got to offer those people a place to allow them to do that. Because Donald Trump's not going to listen to me. He doesn't care that I'm a farmer, and he sure as hell isn't going to listen to me when he finds out I'm a Democrat. My senator here, my two senators that are hardcore MAGA Republicans, they'll listen to 10,000 farmers who voted for Donald Trump calling their office or sending them an email saying, I made a mistake. This guy's bad for agriculture and you need to vote against his policies. Because those are the folks, that's where their power is derived from. So that's why I did it. I would do it again. But I'm just like you. Sometimes I just want to knock my head against a wall because, the feedback from my side was, well, we can't wait around for these people to come over to us. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to. I'm not waiting around. I'm fighting the good fight every day. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm just saying when one of them admits they're wrong and tells us they want to help us do the right thing, maybe we give them a chance to do that. That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
it was pretty brutal.
in a lot of ways, people don't see it very much, but
Yeah.
I typically return the same type of energy to people that I receive
Yeah.
from people. And
Yeah.
I really don't care if someone is a Democrat or a Republican. Now, people see me quite frequently, just like really destroying Republicans that come at me
Yeah.
wrong, right? But it's
Yeah.
all about how they come at me. If they come at me with a civil approach and ask me a question, then that's the same energy I give them back, right?
Yeah.
And people completely miss that. People completely miss that, and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know that I have a lot of conservative followers. I do, but so I give the energy that I'm given, and I kind of feel like you're probably the same way. We're close to the same age. We grew up in the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
You're probably a lot like me in that respect.
I'm doing
Um,
more of that because typically from my side, what I get is like on Blue Sky yesterday. It was like, and yeah, I know I'm going to sound like the old guy standing out on his porch yelling, "Get off my lawn!" But in Blue Sky yesterday, this person who would normally be on my side of the political fence, 95% of the time, got into this shouting match at me, saying, "You called it the fairness. You said the fairness doctrine was a law and not a rule. You said it was a law and it was just a rule, RULE." And then here comes, you said Fox News. Fox News is a cable channel. It's not governed by the FCC. And of course, the point I was making were Fox affiliates out there that use the public airwaves. But I was on a roll on my back porch the night before the Super Bowl. And I just thought, this is the hill you want to die on? So I just blocked her, because it's like, I don't have time for that anymore. We're out here trying to educate folks and offer a little olive branch out there. And, this is how my side comes. I've had much more. I mean, the negative feedback, Matt, it's been 95% people on my side, 5% the other side.
yeah,
That's exactly what's happened, but that's okay because they don't live out here. Most of the people that have a problem with it don't live out here where we live, and they don't understand how, if a farmer loses his farm and ranch, and that's extrapolated across the country, okay, nobody's going to care about what political stripe they were. They're going to
yep,
care about the fact that they can't buy groceries. They're going to care about the fact that single moms and poor kids like me growing up and the elderly and 300 million people around the world that go to bed hungry every night don't have food. So that's why I'm doing this. But yeah, I'm starting to do a little bit more of what you do, just because at a certain point you just like, good God, you're missing the point.
So Daria has a question. Do
Yeah.
you believe that the current administration is threatening tariffs as a real threat or as a distraction? Do you think it's partly a distraction? And what do you think is really going on if it is a distraction?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the tariffs on China are the real deal. Um, I just think that the administration doesn't really understand the impacts, and maybe I'm giving them too much of a benefit of a doubt here, but how they didn't understand the impacts from their first term and that those were going to be even more exacerbated for farmers and ranchers during their second term, I don't understand that. So the threat of tariffs piece, I think that's exactly what I think it started as a real tariff threat against Canada and Mexico. And then I think when they saw the reciprocal tariffs that Canada and Mexico were going to put in place, and all of these Republican elected officials from rural areas started saying, holy shit, you can't do this, then I think that's why they said, well, we're going to put them on hold because the Mexican government and the Canadian government are giving us exactly what we wanted. Not mentioning the fact that they had already done it a year, 2, 5 years earlier. They were just looking for any way out of preventing those reciprocal tariffs. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. But really, even the threat's not working for them because what did they do? When's the last time, Matt, you remember Canadians booing the national anthem at a hockey game? You know, when's the last time you had millions of Canadians saying, "I'm not going to buy any more Kentucky bourbon. I'm not going to buy any more Tennessee whiskey." So even though the tariffs didn't take place, the patriotism in these countries, they're doing, remember the freedom fries, right? They're
Mhm.
doing the same thing in their countries that we did back then, and it's having an economic impact on us. So even their threats aren't working.
So Cece wants to know. I think it was Cece. I had to scroll up but he asked or she asked, what's the best way to get your foot in the door if you have no experience and you want to get involved with campaigns?
Well, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, I always tell people, there are organizations in every county. Some of them are organized, some of them aren't. And that's the best place to get started if you're on one side or the other. If you're not, then my recommendation is find a candidate that you can support. When you listen to them, you hear them saying the things that you agree with. This is somebody, yeah, I'd want to see her elected. And then go and volunteer for their campaign. Breaking into the political process is just like anything else. There's a lot of grunt work at the beginning. You're going to be going out and nailing, yard signs in the yard. You're going to be going door to door with people threatening to stick their dog on you to hand out campaign literature. You're going to be running to get pizzas for the campaign, that kind of thing. It's not sexy. I did all that in the beginning, but I would say those two are the best ways. And you'll just get some guidance and direction. You'll get some guidance and direction in that. Now, the other thing I always tell young people, Matt, that are getting involved is nothing will chew you up and spit you out faster than politics. Okay. So, what's the diplomatic way to say this? Uh, be very cognizant of the people around you and the motivations they have for asking you to come on board. And any of you ladies out there know exactly what I'm talking about. The other side of it is just expect that if you're working at a local level, that when the campaign's over, there's only about a 1% chance you're going to get a job with the politician that you worked for. You've got to take that experience and then maybe reach out to a political consulting firm to get an entry level job. And if you live in rural America, like I did, it means you're going to have to move. There are there are no political consulting firms in, you know, Bolivar, Missouri, or Seymour, Missouri, or any of these other little towns. So that would be my advice: is just don't try to do it on your own. Get involved at the local level and go from there.
You mean you couldn't rent a space like in the back of the dollar store and open up a political consulting firm? Like,
I'm
I
starting
mean,
to wonder.
that's
I'm
what we do in
starting.
Elk City.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's the other thing. If you do it at, it's a good point. I know we're joking, but it's a good point. If you do it at election time, there's a really good chance you might have a campaign headquarters in your little town from a state senator that's running or a U.S. senator or a coordinated campaign. But that's what I would do is just get involved locally and then go from there.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the video, Will, but a few months ago, back during the summer, I took my 10-year-old to the town I grew up in.
I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't find my house,
Yeah.
and I wanted to show him the house I grew up in. We were really really poor, and I wanted him to see that. Right, I
Yeah.
kind of wanted him to see what I've overcome. Right,
Yeah.
breaking the cycle of poverty.
Yeah.
And I can't find my house, and then I realized it was where the dollar store is, and
Yeah.
I
It's
was like,
gone.
that is such an Oklahoma story right there.
Missouri too,
My
man.
Yeah, my childhood home is now a Family Dollar, and
Yeah.
heck, Edwin McCain even wrote me a song about it, so that was great.
Yeah,
But
that was pretty cool. Nobody's written me a song yet. I'll know I've made it on social media when I get a song. I'm just playing little Willie 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 Won't Go Home by the Sweets, and I'm claiming it as mine until I get a real song written about me. So, but yeah, that happens here a lot too. I mean, the little farmhouse I grew up in, my grandma and grandpa and my uncle renovated a little dairy barn across the street from their house on our farm into the house that I grew up on, and it's just collapsing now. Dry all that hard work you put in when you're a kid. Grandpa out there yelling at you to keep the fence fixed and paint the fence and mow the lawn and weed eat, and then you drive by that farm now and it's just falling apart. And I don't know, it's sad. It's sad, because
it is.
I grew up dirt poor too, and I don't know. When you said that, it really hit home. But I can't talk about it anymore because I cry at grocery store openings now, and I'll get going. So
So let's finish up
yeah,
with Skylar. Okay, so have you had any contact with him since your meeting?
yeah,
How
quite a
did that
bit.
sort of end? Like, where are you guys at?
Yeah, I've had quite a bit of contact with him. I don't. There. I wish Skylar would talk about this publicly. Skylar has one really particular uh, thing in his family that uh, it really hits home with Donald Trump's policies. And I hate to do that to you because I don't want to go any further than that because I promised him in the beginning I'd respect his privacy. But it's not just that he's losing money from the federal government that was promised to him. His family is also impacted in a particular way by the policies of Donald Trump. And he's scared about both of these things, which if I were in his shoes, I would be too because Skylar's a unique. I mean, you and I could sit if we just met Skylar and politics never came up. He's exactly the kind of kid that you and I were when we were younger. He started out without a penny to his name. He flipped houses and made some extra money all on his own. And he's actually buying a farm. He went out and found the land and bought a farm. Didn't inherit it. Bought a farm, bought all the equipment and everything, and financed it. And he's doing it all on his own. There's a lot to be respected in that. Where he's caught right now, though, is what you talked about earlier, Matt, and that is he's getting hammered by his side and he's getting hammered by my side. And I think there's a little bit of trying to please everybody going on right there because he's younger and you want people to be your friend. You reach a certain point in life where you don't care anymore, but he's not there yet. So where we are is, and I'm going to catch some heat for this too, I guarantee you. I'm trying to get people in the Democratic Party to listen to Skylar because of the fact that his farm was impacted by, these policies of Donald Trump. And I'm going to there's something that's going to happen in the next couple of days here that's going to be a really big deal. And I'm going to get brutalized by my side for why are you giving somebody like that a voice? But it's all part of this plan that I've got to try to get the Democratic Party to do a better job of communicating to rural America. So that's kind of where we are. I don't know where it's going to go. It may just end right there. I can say, I got somebody to listen to you. You had a chance to share your opinion. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to just say you think Donald Trump ought to be impeached? Or are you going to get involved in making sure that these policies that he's forwarding don't happen anymore? And if you do that, we've got a place for you. If not, well, it was a great conversation. Have a great day. And that's kind of where we are.
Right. Well,
hey, by the way, this picture I have behind me was that's Guyman, Oklahoma. That's on the ranch that my third great grandfather owned, where I guess we can tell everybody that I'm a natural gas baron. Um, I got my check about 2 weeks ago for $58 for the whole year, but it's on this ranch out in Guyman. So that's a picture on the ranch. My great grandma made $1,200 a month off that well, Matt, when she was alive, and now I make $58 split 8 ways. No, I get my eighth is $58 a year.
How old is that? That's really old.
Yeah,
So
it's old. It's old. Yeah, it was good for great grandma. God bless her. So
yeah, that was a significant amount of money back then,
yeah,
huh?
it really was. It really
So,
was.
Will, where do you see um, sort of your platform going? Do you have a vision for what you're going to be doing online in a year, in 2 years? Is this a side hustle for you? Are you going to grow? Like, do you have any plans with that?
Well, I mean, according to social media, either you're going to run for president or I'm going to run for president, and the other one is going to be his vice presidential candidate. So I guess you and I need to drive down there when the weather's better and have a cup of coffee with you. We need to figure out which one of us is running for president and which one's going to be vice president. But other than, other than that, it is taking up more and more of my time. We came out of this and we created a pack called the Back 40, and what we're trying to do is focus on getting farming and ranching and rural policy, uh, supporting candidates, and we would support any candidate of any party that will fight for kind of four rural ideas. One is education, because I don't want to see money taken out of rural education to pay for vouchers for wealthy people in cities to send their kids to school. And that is what's happening, at least in my state. That's what vouchers mean here. The second thing is more economic development in rural areas, because to your point, um, so many towns. I'm lucky. My little hometown is growing. I grew up in Bolivar, Missouri, and it's growing, but it's kind of an exception to the rule. You drive through a lot of these little rural towns, and the whole downtown is just dead now, and the roofs are caving in on all the buildings and that kind of thing. The other thing is pushing back against these farm policies, because what I think, this is going to make me sound a little Woody Guthrie-ish, so I'm just going to warn you in advance, okay? But I really think there's an effort here to corporatize farming. I really do. And I think that I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there's always a grift, behind the scenes. We have the fastest rate of conversion of private small family farms and ranches into Wall Street investment than we've ever had in our history. It's the third highest producing commodity investment on Wall Street right now, farmland. And we're just, down there by where you are. I was talking to a guy the other day. They went out to buy a 187-acre farm. They got the backing from their bank to pay up to 1.25 million for it. Which, holy cow! When you and I were even in our 20s and 30s, that would have been unheard of. They went out there. There were 4 or 5 farmers bidding on it, and then here comes this big Wall Street brokerage company, and they paid $5 million for it for 187 acres. You can't compete with that. How's a kid just starting out in farming, or a guy like you or me with grandkids that want to get into the business we're in? How do you compete against that? You can't. So we're also going to try to push for caps, or we have these in some states. We're going to try to push for caps on the percentage of rural farm and ranch land that can be bought by foreign entities or by investment firms, and that's going to be the heaviest haul, because almost all the politicians are in bed with Wall Street. So I hope to keep going, do my farming, and work with people that are running for office, but I'd like to continue to grow this and, just get a deeper focus on rural America and the issues out here that are being ignored. Because to your point, rural America is dying right now. There are 489 counties around this country where the population is decreasing. They're losing the tax base. Schools are consolidating, and it's just gone. And I'm going to try to stop. I love to joust at windmills. Let's put it that way. So.
So I wanted to get your opinion on something,
Yeah.
because I I don't know if mentally, like, I've just gotten to a place where I just don't believe so many things, or I'm so
Yeah.
desensitized by what's happening in the country. But, there's a lot of fear in the country right now with everything that's going on under the new administration. And sometimes I struggle with this. From you, how much of that is justified and how much of that is sort of overblown?
Okay. The Trump administration, I don't think a whole lot of it is overblown. Do I think democracy is going to disappear? Probably not. Okay. I think we're going to, I mean, it kind of frightens me to have to say probably not. I'm
That's
not
what
going
I
to
was
lie.
thinking. What do
But
you mean, probably?
yeah, yeah. I think there are two things happening here. With Donald Trump, if you do a deep dive into his background, for him it's all about the grift. He doesn't give two shits about policy or what's happening in rural America or education or anything like that. He doesn't have an agenda other than the grift. So what I mean by that is when you deport everybody and you have to build billions of dollars worth of private prisons to house them, you can rest assured that the Trump family is going to be percentage invested in all those private prisons, right? You can rest assured that as we privatize schools in this country, the Trump family is going to be percentage invested in those private schools. Look at what they're doing to push cyber currency right now. They're already invested in that. Okay. So I think with the immediate Trump family, it's about the grift. What worries me more, Matt, are the organizations that surround them because they are driven by ideology. So I've got 30 years of history working against they tried to do it in Oklahoma. The American Legislative Exchange Council is like the Heritage Foundation. They came up here, and anytime these groups want to do something shitty to the environment, they call it the Clean Air Act. Or if they want to destroy farming, they call it the Right to Farm Bill. So they came up here in 2013 and they put all this flowery language in a bill to quote unquote preserve the right of farmers and ranchers to farm. And then what did they do in the bill? They guaranteed that the Chinese could buy farmland here, up to 1% of all the farmland in the state of Missouri. And that's what they did. Smithfield came in and bought 40,000 acres the minute the bill passed. Well, they tried to do it in Oklahoma, and I got involved with a really large nonprofit down there, and we stopped it in Oklahoma. And what made me feel really good about that is only 30% of the farmers down there were opposed to the right to farm bill. By the time it was over, it was like 65%. We convinced them, to vote against it. But these ideological people around him, like Stephen Miller and the Heritage Foundation and the Alec Foundation, they do have an ideological tint to what they're doing, and they do want to change this country for good. And that's why they're destroying government. You know, I never thought I'd talk about these things, Matt, because it just feels weird to talk about it. I've never been a conspiracy guy. I don't like conspiracies. I make fun of people that believe in conspiracies. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of this stuff, if you go back and look at the people that serve on the board of the Heritage Foundation and ALEC and these other groups that are driving this, they're all believers in the Great Replacement theory that eventually the United States of America is no longer going to be majority white and we're going to be run by people of color. And if that happens, we're going to lose our blessing from God. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you just go out and read about the Great Replacement theory, you're going to see names from people in the Heritage Foundation, et cetera. That's the part that scares me because an ideologue is what got us what we had in Germany, in Italy, and Japan. That's ideologue, and we have some of that now here, and it's frightening. So I think we've got forget Democrat, Republican, and Independent. It's time to push back against this stuff at every different level from every different political stripe because some of this stuff, when it's broken, like firing everybody that takes care of our nuclear weapons, and now they can't find them all to bring them back. Firing all the people that are trying to stop the bird flu. 80% of the fowl in Ohio are dead right now, and it's spreading among humans. And we fired everybody and now we can't get them back again. So yeah, I took way too long to answer your question, but I do think we ought to be concerned because of the ideology behind this.
Yeah, and it you talk about the bird flu thing, right?
Yeah,
Um, the amount of money that the country is going to save
yeah,
with these layoffs are going to be greatly overshadowed by the amount of money we have to spend
that's right.
to the ever growing, expanding bird flu. Like,
Yeah,
there's it makes no sense to me. People that are supposedly real intelligent with money
yeah,
don't understand that your first goal of any business is to do no harm, right?
yeah,
If you need to bring on 10 employees, if you need to spend $1 million to prevent from having to spend 10 million, that's what you do,
easy
right?
decision.
And
Yeah.
it's an easy decision, and people are investments.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, once some people get enough money, they no longer see people as investments. They no longer see the value they bring.
Right.
You
That's a
know,
great point. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah. And I'll tell you, what's even more amazing is it's happening this close to COVID-19. It's like this isn't like the Spanish flu where all the people that lived through it are gone now, and we don't have an institutional or historical memory of it. My gosh, we just went through it a few years ago, and if Laughter and Light is right, that this thing's going to start going human to human maybe this year, then we've got a whole other set of problems. It's not just a agricultural problem where eggs get more expensive and poultry gets more expensive. Now we're right back maybe to where we were then, and that's scary.
yeah. So one thing I struggle with, Will, is I see what's going on, and I tell myself, you know what, if during my lifetime we hadn't run up a $35 trillion deficit,
Yeah,
maybe this wouldn't be happening, right?
yeah,
So is this sort of fate? Like, are the roosters coming home? Like, are the cows coming
yeah,
home? Like,
yeah,
in a way, we sort of created all of this ourselves.
yeah,
In a way, we did. We allowed politicians for decades to run up massive debts,
yeah,
including Donald Trump, by the way.
yep,
Um, and now we're sitting here, and I've been telling people for a long time what a huge problem the debt is, and how the interest is going to grow, and it's going to become our largest expenditure, and it's going to become untenable. I don't think, obviously, this is the way to fix that, but 40 years of gluttony basically in this
yeah,
country, over 40 years of gluttony, has got us to this position where people obviously feel like they need to take these drastic measures.
yeah,
And what do you think about that?
yeah. I agree. I mean, I my stepdad, who passed away a few years ago, when Bill Clinton left office, he had a balanced budget. We were paying off the national debt. The tax rate seemed to be at the right place for corporations and for individuals. And my stepdad used to joke, he's a big cattle rancher. He'd joke, they ought to just make Bill Clinton king, because everything seemed to be, clicking then. And it's to your point, politicians want to have their cake and eat it too. And it is a combination of those two things. It's overspending, and it's the fact, I don't know, when you and I were born, what was the corporate income tax rate in some places as high as 90%, something like that?
Something like that.
And now
Yeah.
if they have their way, it's going to be 13%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that to me is the biggest issue. But you can't. I always tell Democrats all the time, you can't ignore the spending aspect of things and just focus on the taxation part. And I do agree with you. Just as somebody that has run his own businesses and is currently doing that, you can't run on loans and deficit forever. Now, there's a percentage of the population and economists that think the USA is exempt from this rule because since we're the strongest economy, we can just print as much money as we want to pay off our debt. And as you said, the chickens will never come home to roost, but I don't believe that. And I've never talked to a common sense economist or expert in economics that believes that either. So yeah, we need to. It's all got to. We've got to get it all under control. And like my idea would have been if you really want to put waste management on steroids, then double the number of inspector generals you have. Don't fire them all, double the number and give them a very specific mission. But the way I look at it is if you've got to lie about all of the money you're saving, like how many times he said, yeah, we were lying about the Gaza condom thing. And then they came back and said, yeah, we were lying about all those LGBTQ, programs overseas. And his response is, well, I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. Well, hell, man, you're getting it wrong every time. But common sense people like us, yes, we've got to attack both of those things because the larger percentage of the budget that we have to spend on interest and paying back the debt, eventually, to your point, Matt, it's going to start taking away from the programs that we all care about. And there are a lot of really good government programs out there, and that's why they were developed in the beginning, because they're good. But yeah, you can't do the sailor on leave thing forever and expect for nothing bad to
Right. And he's going to be wrong about everything, because you can't audit an agency with a $5 billion budget or whatever in a couple of days.
happen.
That's not a thing.
No,
That's not a
no.
thing. You're just going in there with an axe and just cutting
Yeah.
off, you know.
Yeah, and he's saying, and Musk is saying, well, we fired these people, but don't worry, we're going to pull this into, and my programmers are going to look at it. My accountants are going to look at it. Even Republicans didn't vote for Elon Musk to become the OMB. I mean, what, you're going to use your accountants at Twitter to oversee the entire federal government? He said that, not Will. Okay, he said that. I mean, this is the craziest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. It really is. It really is.
And a lot of people don't understand, because people say, well, why can't we just do this, or why can't we do that?
Yeah.
We are so far in debt that the answer to get out of it is there's like 1,000 answers.
Yeah.
You're not going to tax the rich to get out of debt. That is a thing you can do, but it's not going to fix anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about pennies. And
Yeah.
and the things, nobody ever wants to talk about defense. How much of our debt over the last 40 years is defense?
Yeah.
Not that I don't like a strong defense, but do we need to spend
I
15
mean,
times
look,
more than all the other countries combined?
and like more than the top, what is it, 12 or 14, and all but one of them are our allies?
Yeah.
And
I remember as a kid hearing about, I don't know, $50,000 toilets at the Pentagon or whatever. I don't know the exact number, but there's obviously a lot of people with their hands out when it comes to working for the government. There's obviously a lot of corporations that find ways to skim off the top.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had my own experience. I've been kind of open about this, and I won't say a lot about it because that's not what your live is about. But I had to shutter a company a few years back because of I was doing business with a small regional company, and it got bought out by a multi-billion-dollar government contractor. I don't know if you've ever experienced a transition like that in what you do, but it completely destroyed the business. I mean, I finally just I got up to here one day and said, you have 2 weeks to fix it or we're gone. And we closed it down because you couldn't trust them. They breach contract all the time. So you're exactly right. I mean, this is the system that exists there and it's broken. So yes, we do need to fix it. But, it's like my grandpa used to say, you don't get rid of a sick calf in the barn by burning the whole barn down. And that's what they're doing right now.
Well, I mean, that is one way to get rid of it.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's effective, but
but then you got to build a new barn.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So,
Jill, thank you so much. Jill is my moderator. She's down in the chat.
I sneak into your lives on TikTok and I see Jill keeps you straight. That's good. That's good.
So if any of you in the chat have a question for Will, please put it up. I'll try to get to him. So I really believe, and maybe I'm being naive, but I remember the first Trump administration. And I honestly think in a year from now, we will have forgotten about everything that's happened today.
Yeah.
The first administration, not with Doge, but with all the tariffs and everything,
right,
we did the exact same thing.
We did
the exact same thing, and everyone forgets it, right? And everyone's screaming fire and brimstone and all this. We did this exact same thing in the first Trump administration, and people don't even remember it. It's an afterthought. And especially with the tariffs, I think all this stuff is going to eventually go away, and we'll forget about it. The Doge thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
Will most of this stuff get overturned in courts? Will most of this stuff stick? What do you think?
I don't know. I got to tell you, Matt, I had a conversation with a attorney friend of mine that works for Brian Cave Law Firm, which was one of the biggest in the world. And he had a discussion with a former federal judge that's retired now. And right now, the Trump administration is going along with the courts. So when the courts say they're supposed to freeze something, they're doing that. Scary thing is, you've got the vice president of the United States and this multi-billionaire telling the president, just don't listen to the courts. And if you think about it, I guess maybe the only thing our forefathers did wrong is they put the executive branch in charge of enforcing that it follow the judicial branch's rulings. Because from what he tells me, and I'm not an expert in this, but I had a long conversation with him about it, is that it would be U.S. Marshals and law enforcement in the executive branch that would be responsible for enforcing that the executive branch follow the judicial rulings of the courts. Well, what are the odds that's going to happen? What are the odds that the FBI or the U.S. Marshal Service is going to go down to the White House or go to some executive branch building and make sure that people follow the rulings of the court? If he just decides, well, we're not going to listen to the courts and we're going to do what we want to do, then we truly are. This is not hyperbole. We truly are in a constitutional crisis at that point, because he's already told the legislative branch of government, what you do doesn't matter. Like a lot of these closures that he's doing, these are divisions of the government that were set up through the legislative process. They're funded through the legislative process, and they can only be ended through the legislative process. And he said, forget it. That's what these court cases are putting these freezes on for, is because of the way they're doing it. They're ignoring the legislative branch of government to do it. So, that's where the constitutional crisis will come in. If he says, I'm just going to ignore the courts, then we're there, because he controls the law enforcement capacity to make him and the rest of the executive branch, follow the law. To your point, I've talked with people in the former Biden administration before, and I said, you guys were your own worst enemy, but what else could you do? You stepped in and you offered billions of dollars in subsidies to farmers and ranchers to keep them from going under. You negotiated with the Chinese and you got some really big soybean contracts in place. So you saved row crop farmers. You did a better job than any other government in the world of keeping inflation as low as you could. But one of the net results of that, in fairness, is that Americans didn't feel the same pain that everybody else did. So to your point, we've just forgotten about it. So, but I don't know. I want to believe that the system will be able to stay intact because of 57 years of living within the system. But I also see some ancillary things out there that they're doing that make me wonder, is it going to be different this time? Like if they decide to ignore the judicial branch, et cetera, then it's a whole new ballgame, I think,
Yeah. And, if Republicans in Congress won't hold the executive branch accountable for anything, if they're coming out and saying, that the courts are imposing on executive power and coming up with these excuses, that's not a good sign.
Well, and it's just like, so Senator Kennedy, I call him Foghorn Leghorn from Louisiana, a guy who, by the way, never had an accent until he ran for the Senate.
No, he didn't.
Yeah. He's on the radio today. I was out picking up some medicine from the pharmacy, and he's on the radio today disagreeing with the president's notion that Ukraine started the war. And he said, he really went out on a limb, Matt. He said, I just disagree with the notion that Ukraine started the war. And I'm like, it's a lie. That's what you need to say. It's a lie. Ukraine did not start the war. Russia did. And they can't even when it's just like a blatantly false fact, they can't find the testicular fortitude to just say it's a lie, So yeah, they're not impressing me,
So Donald Trump comes out and he calls Zelensky a dictator. Basically claims, Ukraine started the war. Calls Zelensky a dictator.
Yeah.
Talks about Zelensky not allowing elections
I
to
know.
go on in Ukraine when the entire country's been flattened,
Yeah.
and they're under martial law.
And
I
that's
don't even
written
know.
into their constitution, by the way, that during a war, you're not you don't have elections. The people decided that.
Right.
Yeah.
And what would that election look like?
Right.
Who would be voting?
Oh,
Um,
could you imagine what Russia would do in that election? I mean, we thought 16 was bad. It looked like child's play compared to what Russia would do with social media and all these other tools.
so but people in this country, they don't have the ability to discern. They
Yeah.
read Zelensky dictator, no
Right.
elections,
Right.
start, and they just believe it and they run with it.
I'll hear about it this Saturday when I go eat with the guys. That's all they'll be talking about. Well, Zelensky started the war,
You're gonna say how, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They know me. I know them. It'll be a fun Saturday morning.
so I guess my question is, would we even be here having this conversation if that happened during World War II? If the president of the United States came out and
Yeah.
basically sided with the guy from Germany, I won't say his name,
Yeah.
like what would the world look like today? And people don't realize that this could escalate into a much broader thing
Oh,
because
yeah.
Europe and other countries over there, no matter what Donald Trump says, they're going to do what they think is right.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to do what
Yeah.
America should be doing if we don't.
And they've made that clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people, just like a lot of people have been, taunting Canadians, saying their country's weak. Now
Yeah.
they're saying that about Europe. I'm telling you, Europe will wipe Russia off the map
Oh, yeah. No
in
question
a
about it.
in a
Yeah.
heartbeat. They can't even
Yeah.
beat Ukraine.
Yeah.
They don't want no piece of Europe. And
Yeah.
we act like we're the big bad wolf and all this stuff, and we're a bunch of Billy badasses. Yeah, Russia don't want any part of Europe at
No,
all.
and the thing is, the only thing saving Russia's ass right now are these peace talks and Trump doing what he's doing. You know, and I just, God, man, this is the part. Like I tell everybody all the time, like this because you kind of have that calming influence on people too when you try to describe what's happening. Is I feel it sometimes too. I mean, I'm trying to sort through everything that's going on and talk about how we can push back against different parts of it. But I feel the shock and awe campaign myself. I mean, it's really hard to stay on top of everything that's happening and talk about what you can do to push back against it. And I feel that way with what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, the president of the United States went and is sitting down with the leader of the most adversarial nation in our history, and he didn't even invite the leader of the country that's actually at war. And
Yeah,
then was shocked to learn that the president of that country said, "We're not going to agree to anything. We're not a part of negotiating." I mean, art of the deal, my ass. It's like I don't get it. I don't get it. But yeah, you're 100% right in your description of it, and I don't even know what he expects is going to happen. I mean, the worst case scenario I see is that Russia, has a justification to maybe use tacticals or something like that in an effort to try to end the war sooner. But I agree with you. I think if they do something like that, it's over. Europe goes in and just makes a parking lot of everything from the border all the way to Moscow.
yeah. People they either never knew or they forget that you know these massive defense budgets the United States
Yeah.
had for the last 50 years. We were literally building NATO's militaries.
Yeah.
We built Israel's military. We built
Yeah.
Europe's military. We built these militaries, and they're some of the best militaries in the world, and
Yeah.
they're surrounding Russia. And this idea that Europe is weak,
Yeah.
I would say, what does that say about us? If they're
Yeah.
weak and we built their military, what does that
Yeah.
say?
100%.
Um,
And on the other side of this, you were talking about USAID. I read an article the other day that for every dollar we spend through USAID, we prevent having to spend $7 to $8 militarily because of bad things that happen when you don't work with the rest of the world. Um, NATO is almost 3 times more than that. for every dollar we spend at NATO, it's like $28 to $34 we don't have to spend later on. Now you toss one war into that, and all of a sudden it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for every dollar we invest. And
Yeah.
you and I, being business people, like even if you don't agree with the policy, it's good business, right? So
So I got a question in the chat. Hi, Will. I live in Wisconsin, where the Democratic Party basically gave up trying to win northern Wisconsin. Do you see any movement from the Wisconsin Democratic Party to become competitive in the north?
I think we're going to see a movement across the board on the part of the Democrats to start speaking to rural America. And I say that for a very specific. Well, hell, I'm just going to breaking news right here on Mr. Global's Live. Okay, uh, we're going to have a meeting in St. Louis tomorrow where the chair of the Democratic Party is coming down. The new Democratic Party chair is going to come down, and he and I are going to go around that part of the state talking to farmers and ranchers and rural people, some even Republicans, about, what are the issues that concern you and what do you want to see the Democratic Party do to speak more effectively and more directly to rural America. And I got to be honest with you, that was a big ask, and they're responding and they're doing it. If they keep that up, that's a good thing because they're going to catch some heat from some of these people. But I like this guy. He's not the guy that the powers that be in the Democratic Party wanted. Ken Martin is not the guy that the powers that be wanted. They wanted the chair from, and don't get me wrong, the chair from Wisconsin is a great guy, but he was more of the moneyed guy, the fundraiser type guy. And Nancy Pelosi and the other powers that be, they were really pushing him, and the rank and file of the Democratic Party said, no, we want Ken Martin because he comes from Minnesota, where it's the Democratic and Farmers Party. And, he's done a lot of work with rural Democrats up there. And Minnesota, for the most part, is a blue state because of that. So I'm excited about this meeting on Friday. And I'm not kidding you. I haven't even broken that on my channel yet. So, but we're going to be doing that, and I'm excited about it. And I'm excited about seeing where it goes.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
How important is it? Because this is one of the things that really just drives me nuts, right? How important is it for the Democratic Party to basically get rid of the nursing home of leaders that exist that run the Democratic Party? Like, how
Yeah.
important is it for the Democratic Party to be done with these people who just continue to hold their seats out of some sense of power or whatever, and they don't allow new ideas, the young people to come up? You have your Chuck Schumer, your Pelosi, these dinosaurs that exist in really both parties. How important is it for the Democrats to like, hey, it's time for change. You got to go. You got to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really important. And I'll tell you, I always joke, okay, so here's Nancy Pelosi is one of those people that you love to dislike, but you want her on your team. Even at the age that she's at now, she's a brilliant strategist. The problem is that they've all become so ingrained in the money aspect of it because with Citizens United, it just took the caps off of everything. And now businesses and corporations can give as much money as they want. So what's happened is instead of having this two-tier approach where ideas and raising money both hold an equal value in both parties, the money part of it's gone up here and the ideas part of it is sitting down here.
Yeah.
And, I just can't believe I never even talked to a Republican that agrees with Citizens United. Everybody thinks it's a shitty idea. So why aren't we holding our politicians accountable to get a constitutional amendment that says corporations are not people and therefore they can't give unlimited amounts of money to political campaigns? We all agree on that, and yet we do nothing about it. So to your point, yes, and I do think that this shot that was fired across the bow when they elected Ken Martin as the Democratic Party chair, I do think that were the first steps in people pushing back against, people aren't going to like this, but internally the geezer squad, and telling them that we're going to start making these decisions about grassroots Democratic politics at the grassroots level. So I think that was good. And I think the people inside the Democratic Party are driving that as well. they're listening to the younger voices. They're listening to the people that are getting out there, in rural America and coming into the cities and, and that type of thing. And whether you like her, loathe her, or whatever, it's one of the reasons why AOC has been so successful, because she'll put on a pair of muck boots and go out to rural New York and go to a dairy farm and step in the cow shit to talk about why we shouldn't deport that dairy farmers, workers back to Mexico. We need more of that across the entire party and in both parties. I can't remember the last time even my Republican senator came down here close to where I live and held a town hall. It just doesn't happen.
So I've seen the political prowess and expertise of some of these older people. Um, how is it possible that you can be so good at something and so terrible at just talking to the American people? How is it possible
Yeah.
that you can be this expert political strategist where you're always playing chess and they're always playing checkers,
Yeah.
but you don't have the ability to speak to people?
I think it comes back to what you said earlier, Matt. It's the same reason why you and I know some of the most strategic, intelligent business people in the world in rural America where we live, yet they think everything this guy's doing to destroy government is a great idea. The two do not connect. It's
Yeah.
like the old Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other. And man, if I could explain it, I would probably be going around the country giving TED Talks, because I don't understand it. I don't know if it's just you got to say what big money needs to hear in order for big money to give you part of that money. So therefore, you ignore everything else, or if it's just living in that bubble, because it is a bubble. I mean, I go up there several times a year, and I go to meetings of political consultants and to talk with different people, and it is a bubble. And if you spend all your time in that bubble, you very quickly run the risk of, losing touch with the everyday people out there, because you're constantly, I mean, I call them bootlickers. When I go up there and I'll just see these people just bootlicking all the politicians up there. Nobody ever says that's a bad idea. You're wrong. That won't play well in rural America, whatever it might be in either party. And the more of that happens, the more bubbled it is, if that's a word. And, the more separated they get from us. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it has something to do with what you talked about with business people not understanding that investments in government are good.
Right. So to
Hoof
me, as a
scrubbers.
politician,
Yakety says hoof scrubbers. I like that one too. I may start using that one.
to me as a politician, your main goal should be to completely contrast, show the difference between you and whoever you're competing against,
Yeah.
right? So they do this, you do this, right? Um, and if you're competing against someone who, let's call it like it is, a pathological liar, um, isn't the best course of action to like tell the truth about things? Like really contrast your tone is
Yeah.
to do the opposite of what they're doing. And let's be honest, there's a lot of bullshit comes out of the Democratic Party that's simply
Yeah.
not true. And some people, are very good at hiding their lies, and some people are not. Some people blatantly lie because they know their constituents and supporters don't care. Other people kind of wrap their lies up in tradition, and
Yeah.
if you look a certain way, you can tell a lie and nobody will know. I felt like one of the major ways Democrats really took a beating over the last 4 years is they consistently lied about things that just there was no reason to do it. And I see that from an oil and gas perspective. They lied about oil
Yeah.
and gas a lot, but
Yeah.
there's other things too. At what point does someone just start telling the truth? At what point does a politician say, you know what, I think maybe you
Yeah.
tell the truth?
That's the $1 million question, because, uh, the population has not always been kind to people that speak the truth. The population often wants to hear what they want to hear versus, the truth. It's like, look at any politician that steps up and says we have to cut the budget and increase taxes if we want to balance the budget, and that's good for our economy long term. They just get crucified on the tax cross, we call it, and they don't win because they were honest. I do think that a lot of the misinformation that comes out of the Democratic Party about rural America is because they weren't taking the time to really learn about the very programs that they're defending. I mean, you literally have Democrats in Congress right now that are defending these programs because they know it's the right thing to do. But if you sat down with them and had a conversation about the programs and how they work and what the impacts are, they may not be able to answer that question. So to your point, like I was guilty for years until I watched your stuff of saying, don't elect that guy president because he's going to drive oil prices up, or you need to elect this guy because she's going to drive oil prices down. I was the poster child of gas and oil disinformation before before I started watching your stuff. I think part of the problem is though is like I don't really have a problem listening to people that have an opposing point of view. And then if it makes sense to me, I'm willing to go a little further with them. Maybe that's the problem with politicians is they've got an agenda they need to push to raise money, and they're not always willing to listen to the other side. Although I will say there are a core group of senators in the Senate in both parties that try to work together to do the right thing, but still in the end, it's always party over collaboration, you know. Um,
Yeah.
if things get really bad, Mr. Global, I mean, if we are all eating out of trash cans before this is over, as they say, um, that might be the reset that we need to get a little bit of truth telling in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. So after the election, Joe Biden took a lot of heat, right, for kind of staying in, maybe. And it was funny because the people that were giving Joe Biden heat were the same people that were on board with Joe Biden staying in, right?
Yeah.
And then he got a lot of heat. Do you think it mattered at all after 4 years of inflation and gas prices and skyrocketing home prices? Does that matter?
I think that a primary would have been good for the Democratic Party. I mean, we followed all the rules. Did they do anything wrong or illegal? No. This is exactly how it's supposed to work if a president steps down that late in the process. So I laugh at people when I hear them say, "Well, you selected a president." No, we didn't. We followed the rules that are in place and we did what we're supposed to do. But Joe Biden. I've got a letter on right in the other room, or no, it's right up here from Joe Biden thanking me for reaching out to him as one dad to another. Okay, because I wrote him a letter about the book he wrote about going through that process of his wife and child passing away. And he is a good man personally. I've worked with him in the past. I know people that have worked with him, but he did kind of make the promise that he was only going to be president for one term. He did kind of make the promise, and there were a lot of people in the Democratic Party that thought that's what was going to happen, that he was going to run for president, get Trump out of there because Joe was a blue collar guy that people liked. And he did that. He did that part of it. But then he got there, and I just don't know how anybody could have decided that, being 88 years old at the end of your second term was going to be a good thing for America. There should have been somebody around him all the way telling him, hey, we need to have a primary. We need to let somebody else run. So that to me was a mistake. Yes, it was a mistake. I still, do I think they could have overcome it? I do. I mean, in the end, it's 209,000 votes across 4 states that were the difference in this election. Could we have convinced 209,000 people to change their vote? Or more importantly, what about the 12 to 14 million Democrats that just stayed home? Could we have convinced 300,000 of them to get out and vote? Yeah, I think we could have. And part of that could have been done by going out and talking to rural America and not ignoring it, because there were just a lot of people that said, I'm done with the whole thing and I'm not going to vote. And they didn't.
Well, that leads into the next question I was already going to ask you. What's the deal with Democrats not showing up to vote, especially when it's really important? Like they didn't show up for Hillary Clinton, and so we got Donald Trump, and then they didn't show up for Kamala. And what is the deal? One, with Democrats apparently having some issue with showing up to vote, and secondly, why does it always happen when there's a woman that's a nominee? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah. Gee, I wonder why.
I'm asking you because
No,
you've
I
been
know.
in campaigns, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen maybe some data, or maybe you know something about this that I don't, because I really have no idea why it's harder to get Democrats to vote than it is Republicans. I
Yeah.
know there's demographics involved. Old people
Yeah.
always vote. Republicans have more old people. I get that. Is there something else I'm missing? And why it's so
Well,
difficult to get Democrats out to vote?
all the women out there, when I make this next statement, are going to say, "No shit, Sherlock. Thank you for mansplaining this to us." But if you're a female running for the presidency, you immediately are going to be at a 3 to 5% delta deficit. And what I mean by that, not to get too deep into the weeds, but what I mean by that is if you go to like North Carolina and you look at how the male candidate for governor did, how many votes he got, and then you go and look at the number of votes that Kamala Harris got, it's over 100,000 vote difference. He got more. And you can extrapolate that. All if you go back and look at the 2016 election, same thing. You extrapolate that across multiple different states where the male candidate running for governor or for senator or for lieutenant governor, whatever, they get a significantly higher amount of votes than the female running for president. A lot of that's just the old misogyny stuff. I mean, you can throw a rock anywhere around here, same where you are, and find plenty of women that, oh, a woman just shouldn't run for president. A woman can't lead the country. So that's about 3 to 5% of it. The rest of it is, there's a poll that a good friend of mine, Andrew Short, did out in Colorado. So this only speaks to Colorado, but it's a good mix of, Blue Denver and Boulder and a lot of farmers and ranchers. It was economics. I mean, to your point earlier, where you said, could you overcome the economy and the inflation and everything? For whatever reason, I mean, I can laugh at this all I want or roll my eyes or think it's crazy, but for whatever reason, about 45 to 50% of Democrats thought that Trump had a better message on the economy than Harris did. And, I can laugh at that. I can say, I don't understand that. How could anybody be that dumb? I can make all the comments that a Democrat can make about that. But the truth is, in the end, it really doesn't matter because that's how they felt and they didn't get out and vote because of that. So, as a strategist and as somebody that cares about the country, I got to go into this next election thinking, how are we going to speak to those issues that they thought we ignored? And like, there's one question in there about housing, for instance, and it's like, we're going to work with local governments to change zoning so that the people build more houses. What the hell does that mean to anybody? Like if I was running for office, I'd be like, I'll tell you what the problem is. We got these fat cats on Wall Street coming into rural towns in rural America and buying up 100, 150 houses. And they would rather see them sit there empty than rent them for $1 less than what they think they're worth. And in my little hometown in Bolivar, Missouri, home ownership is an all-time low and poverty is at an all-time high in a city that's growing like crazy. And that's how you have to talk to people. I mean, you can't, when you start talking about generic policy at the high level, all people hear is Charlie Brown's teacher. That's it. So if we're going to change it, we got to speak directly to people in ways they can understand, and we've also got to talk down at the not talk down to people, but speak at their level and explain what it means in their little town, in their county, and not these grandiose schemes that make us look smart but don't really do anything to convince people at the local level that they're going to work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I suspect you do that very thing in your daily life because I do.
Yeah.
When I'm
Yeah.
talking about very complex things like
Yeah.
energy, I try to make it to where people can really understand it because it
Yeah.
doesn't do me any good I can go off into a whole bunch of industry talk and engineering jargon and nobody's going to know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I think some people just naturally sort of have the ability to explain things in a way that most people can understand.
I
I
agree with
need,
that.
yeah, I need people to explain things to me
Yeah.
in a way I can understand because, yeah, I'm really good at what I do. Trust me, there's a million things I don't know that I'm really dumb about. And
Me
when you
too.
explain it to me, I need you to talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old or I
Me
won't get
too.
it,
Me
right?
too.
And politicians are terrible at doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump is not. Donald
Yeah.
Trump can do that, even though he's lying the whole time. They're
Yeah.
getting it.
We had a former governor here, Mel Carnahan, that grew up a farm kid, and he was so good at that. He was one of the last Democratic statewide office holders in the state, and he was so good at that, not talking down to people, but meeting them at their level. And I mean, I'd watch him when he was in a crowd, of multimillionaires talking about investment in Missouri, or when he was in front of a bunch of farmers at a local cattlemen's meeting. Who he was and what he did didn't change a bit. I mean, he was just a down to earth guy that understood complex issues and it can explain them to people. And we need a lot more than that, to your point. And somebody, let me see who it was, Devious made that point. I think that a bunch of people were so confident that she would win that they could protest vote. And that's true too. I mean, I don't know how much of my stuff you watched before the election, but I kept telling people, don't pay attention to these people that says she's going to win in a landslide. And I'll tell you, nothing pissed me off more than there were two creators out there that claimed to be, political experts, and I'm a political scientist, and they were holding court every day on social media, telling particularly women, don't worry about it because this is going to be a blowout. We're going to win Florida. We're going to win Texas. We're going to win. And I'm telling people, guys, there's a chance she could win, but this election is going to be decided by 100, 200,000 votes across the same 3 or 4 states that is always decided across. Do not buy into this horse shit that this is going to be a blowout. Do you know that both of them muted their accounts the day after the election? They would come on and talk and do this mea culpa about how, oh, well, such a wide range of unbelievable things happened that caused me to be wrong. And then they turned off their comments so that guys like me couldn't go in there and give them one of these. You know what I mean? And so anyway, I think that's a good point that they make, that there was way too much victory speak and not enough regular down home talk, and God, it was right there. I mean, it was just, it's like when you reach for that thing up on the top shelf and your fingers just tickle the bottom of it, but you can't get a hold of it. That's how close this election was.
So do you think, and I was wanting to see if you would bring it up. So for my whole life,
Yeah.
right? My whole life, I've heard a few of the same things in every election. And what you hear from Democrats and Republicans both
Yeah.
is, if we lose this election, it's all over. If we lose this election, we're going to lose this country, right? I've heard that my whole life.
Yeah.
And and it's almost like the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
Now when our democracy is literally potentially at stake. I don't want
Right.
to say it is at stake, but it's definitely reason for concern. Now when you say those same hyperbolic things, they have no meaning. People have been
Yeah.
hearing this crap their whole life.
Yeah.
So Kamala Harris doesn't have the ability to get up and say, if you vote for this person, this is what's going to happen, because nobody's going to believe
Right.
any of it,
We've been
right?
hearing that our whole life. It's the
Yeah,
end of
we've been hearing it
America.
our whole lives.
Yeah. We're going to be communists. We're going to be socialists. We're going to be
Yeah,
fascists. Yeah.
mushroom clouds, all
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Like, and people tune out and they're like, no.
Yeah.
And then when you ask people, of course, I don't do this on my lives. I really don't like to do political lives on TikTok
Yeah.
because everybody and their dog does it. And I feel like
Yeah.
nobody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But you have to consider the fact that all of the hyperbolic language that we've been exposed to over the years,
It
and
has an
when
impact.
people talk to people and say, why did you vote this way or that way, they are completely unaware of any of the things that people who are plugged into politics are telling them. They're like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
Donald Trump said this. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
They completely tune it out until the day they go vote. And
Yeah.
a
So you
lot of
got all
times,
that party hyperbole happening out there. And then, Matt, you and I live in rural America. Just even when you were a kid and you were in your teens and your 20s and 30s, how many times do you go out to a rural job site or you go onto a farm and what do you hear playing in the background all day long? Talk radio all day long. So it's like, not only do you have the hyperbole coming out of the parties that woe is me and the world is doomed, but all day long out there in rural America, these good old boys are getting fed this steady diet of you can't trust the government, you can't trust the media, you can't trust this, you can't trust that. and then we're surprised that nobody believes up is up and down is down. I mean, this is all a symptom of the disease, you know.
Yeah.
And the fact is, and a lot of people don't want to hear this, is it's going to. I mean, I don't want to break my arm patting you and I on the back, but I think that the only answer is for people like us from many different walks of life getting out there and breaking it down to the granular level and explaining why this stuff is true, because nobody's just going to take your word for it anymore. And that's why I think it's important. Like when I do my lives and I quote a source and I say, pull it up, go look at it. And then you do a great job of pulling up charts and things like that. And you still run into people like poor Bob that, you know, they want to be right more. They want to be right more than they want to be right, if you know what I mean. And, but I think it's going to be a heavy lift. It's going to be a really heavy lift to walk America back to where it needs to be in terms of valuing fact, because there are a lot of Bobs out there. You know, there are a lot of Bobs out there.
Bob made it to the global Westmoreland interview today.
Well, I got to tell you, man, I told you in a live the other night, your relaxation mode, that's one of my dirty little pleasures in life is I love to just go back. I bet I've watched your Bob videos 100 times each, because there is a little part of me that is just like, you dumb SOB, you know? I don't know. I'm petty.
There's also a little part of you that wants to like Bob.
There is, because I shouldn't say anymore. I mean, it's just Bob is that guy that you know, like, okay, but Mr. Global, you forgot. If you look here, you know, and you're like, man, if Bob was talking to me about how to pick apples or what's the right way to wash your socks or, you know, what's the best way to shovel your driveway, I'd be all on Team Bob, you know. But why in the hell did Bob have to decide to talk about the complex issues surrounding oil and gas? You know, I don't know, Bob.
Oh man. Well, Will, I really appreciate you coming in.
You
I've
bet.
taken up an hour and a half of your time. I don't want to
You
take any
bet.
more of your time. And I'm going to hold you. So me and Will have an agreement. He's going to interview me on his.
I'm
right?
going to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he will let you guys know. I'm sure he'll let me know. I'm free whenever you want to do it, Will. I'd be happy to come in and do the same thing. Support your channel, right? I think creators need to do this more and
Yeah.
support each other more.
Plus, your life's a mystery to me. I want to hear all about Matt and how you grew up and what you did and all that stuff. So
I'm an open book.
yeah.
I'm an
Hey,
open
I
book.
do want to tell you something, and I wasn't kidding about this in our messages back and forth. You know, I really have been telling people in my party at very high levels about your stuff. And there may come a time, I'm going to put you on the spot here. There may come a time when maybe you'd have an opportunity to speak to some of them, especially people that are running for larger offices like U.S. Senate, Congress, things like that. So I may send some people your way, and maybe you can educate them just like you've educated the rest of us.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Will, thank you so much for coming in. Jill, the moderator, thank you so much. I saw Nadia down there earlier. Will, Nadia wants you to follow her. Nadia. Okay. She's a friend of mine. And I don't know if you follow Jill.
I do follow Jill.
Okay.
Nadia.
Nadia. Just type it in. She'll come up.
She'll pop up. Okay, I will. And
thank you so much, Will. I'll talk to you soon. Great live. Really appreciate you coming in.
You bet. Have a good day, everybody.